The New York Times, the front page of the New York Times. I have to give myself a name.
There is Donald Trump rating himself based on some of the media reaction to last night's debate. Welcome back to the conversation. Craig Roberts along with constitutional lawyer, writer, and reporter Joe Murray. A look at the top stories of the week and their impact on your life. And before we leave the topic too much of last night's debate, some thoughts, if you would, Joe, not only in terms of the issue here, that part of the message I think that's resonating with voters has been Trump touching on issues concerning jobs and quality of life in America and the way the middle class has suffered for so many years. I have to wonder if, aside from trying to derail him because they feel threatened by him, wouldn't the GOP establishment be better served to listen to the voters and quit dismissing them?
Well, you know, I think this is what is going on in the mindset of the GOP establishment. They've always viewed Trump as a joke, which I think is a huge mistake because he's not. He's a very serious candidate. And I know I was laughed at very early on, even back in 2012, when I said this man, if he decides to run, will do extremely well, and I think he can win it. But they're dismissing him because they're dismissing him, Craig, because they think that the issues he's espousing, economic nationalism, non-interventionism, a return to a time where we could say what we wanted to without fear of being boycotted at every turn. He is bringing us back there, and that's a time that many in the establishment believe was long gone. I mean, they thought it was over. It's dead. Trump is resurrecting that sense of American spirit that, yes, this is a government for the people, by the people. We don't have to take, basically, as my old boss Pat Buchanan said, a two-party system that is two wings on the same bird of prey. He is giving them a choice, which is why I'm glad he did not commit to supporting the nominee, because I think the American people are frustrated with two parties that, even though they talk a good game during election time, they very much govern the same way, and it's all about maintaining their own power. So, yes, I think that what we have is a very interesting dynamic, and I'm firm in my belief that I do think Donald Trump has what it takes to win this. And I wouldn't be surprised after looking at last night that if Trump is able to get this nomination, that Ted Cruz might not be his running mate, and I think Mike Huckabee would find a place in a Trump administration as well. I think Trump is fusing together a very, very eclectic block of voters. He's going to be able to appeal to Democrats, blue-collar Democrats. I think he's winning over some reluctant evangelicals. I mean, I know his abortion explanation sounded somewhat like a commercial, but I do think it was sincere. There's so many dynamics going on here that I think that the party would be very remiss to think that Trump is a joke and can go away. They can say it all they want. They can have the folks on Fox News. They can have Charles Krafthammer. They can have Frank Lutz. They can say Trump is a joke till the cows come home. But what's happening, Craig, and what we're seeing in these polls is that the American people are responding to him, and they're responding to him because he is giving them the opportunity to reclaim the America many thought was dead and gone.
What did you think of the exchange between Rand Paul and Governor Christie in relationship to the NSA and the whole issue of the telephone records? Obviously, very strong sort of libertarian approach that Rand Paul takes to this issue of gathering data. Well, Chris Christie said, hey, look, you know, when I was in the Attorney General's office and we were dealing with the aftermath of 9/11, it was critically important to be able to have as much data as we possibly could get our hands on, and he believes it's fundamental to the security of the United States. What are your thoughts on that exchange between Paul and Christie?
Well, I'm going to give this disclosure that I am more fond of Rand Paul's position. That being said, I think Chris Christie mopped the floor with Rand Paul. Rand Paul was not prepared to engage in a war of words. That was very evident. I think he'd already gotten a little bit off kilter when, in the very beginning, he tried to attack Donald Trump, and Donald Trump turned to him and said, "I've given you tons of money." I think that kind of got him off the rocker a little bit. And it seemed like as he was engaged with Chris Christie, look, I mean, Chris Christie does his thing, saying that, look, I was there, I saw it, I'm the only one that fought terror, and he appealed to the heartstrings, which, you know, it sounds good, but there's a lot of good arguments to retaliate, which Rand Paul comes back and says, I want to take phone records from terrorists and not necessarily, innocent civilians. And that's a valid point. But the way Chris Christie was able to take that and make it look like Rand Paul was a buffoon, because basically saying, how do you know which is which? Even though Rand Paul had a very wonkish explanation. It was Chris Christie's basically Donald Trump light behavior that won the day. And I really thought that when Rand Paul basically brought up the Obama hug to try to knock Christie off his game, I thought he had done it until Christie again came back and said the hugs that I remember are the hugs of the victims and the firefighters and the first responders. Chris Christie had a punch for every attempted punch that Rand Paul had. So I think that clearly went to Chris Christie. I do think there is room for that argument to be made. Rand Paul just didn't make it.
Ted Cruz, he made some pretty strong words with regard to the issue of Islamic terrorism. In fact, I quote, "We need a commander-in-chief that speaks the truth. We will not defeat radical Islamic terrorism as long as we have a president unwilling to utter the words radical Islamic terrorism." Of course, Cruz, I think, scored some big points with that comment.
He did. Ted Cruz was masterful in the time that he was given, but the problem with Ted Cruz is that he was just overshadowed by both Donald Trump and Chris Christie and Rand Paul, that exchange. And he was also overshadowed by, I think, by John Kasich because of the hometown advantage. He was just not, and I don't say this as a negative, but he just wasn't memorable. He was brilliant when he had those time to speak, but he just did not give you a lot to remember. Now, I think that will change. I think what's going to happen is we're going to see the dynamic of this field change. You're going to see some of the guys that were on the number 10, 9, and 8 and 7 spots. That's going to change up, and some of the others from the 11 to 17 ranks are going to come on up. But Ted Cruz just got to stay the course. Do I think Ted Cruz can win? I don't think so. I don't think it's right for him at this moment. Do I think he will make an excellent VP to one of the men on the stage? I do. Again, people think I'm nuts, but I can see a Trump-Cruz ticket doing very well, and I can see that really captivating. I mean, what better ticket could you have than Donald Trump, the man that's not beholden to the establishment, and Ted Cruz, the man that called out Mitch McConnell as a liar? You talk about a ticket that's going to be rebellious. You got it right there. So I think you got that potential, and you need to see a little bit more of that Ted Cruz that you saw there on the Senate floor that is going to be more than willing to stick a thumb in the eye. He's got it. He just has to figure out a way to muster more time in these debates.
Rubio, is he old enough, seasoned enough politically to be able to continue to capture much attention?
That's a good question. I think there's going to be a lot of interest going on to the next debate with that. I think what you have to do, and this is the problem, and honestly, Craig, and I know I sound like a broken record, and I'm not doing this because I have nothing else to say, but the big thing that a lot of these guys had to do yesterday is get out of the shadow of Donald Trump. And I don't think any of them were able to do it. As long as Trump is staying there at center stage, as long as everybody is hanging on his word, because, look, you have his supporters that are waiting for him to say the stuff that makes him go nuts. You have his detractors that are waiting for him to say something that could derail his campaign. And right now, all eyes are on him. Now, I think for Jeb Bush, that's a huge advantage because Jeb Bush, I think, just wants to get through these debates without looking like a fool. Because he's had a hard enough time doing one-on-one interviews, commanding the stage, let alone with all the others. So I think Jeb's happy with that. But to answer your question, time will tell. I think this is the first debate. I think a lot of them were getting the kinks knocked out. Let's see what happens in the next 2 or 3 debates and see how the lower tier kind of gets up to the upper tier and some of the upper tier drop down to the lower tier.
Well, and I think that analysis of the notion that last night's event was really about those that might be able to break out from underneath the shadow of Donald Trump was what the night was really about. I mean, at the end of the day, what did they manage to get? I think amongst the 10 candidates on the dais, they averaged something like 8 minutes, 9 minutes each. Not much substance in that upon which the average voter can say, okay, I like his style and his thoughts. I think I'll go with this guy. I think it's more about simply Trump continuing to be Trump and everybody else trying to see if they can grow big like a bear. You know what they say? If you run into a bear in the woods, they say you should open up your jacket real wide, stand on your tippy toes, and try to appear to be as large as you possibly can to intimidate them back. And I think that's what a lot of last night was about.
I do, and I think if you notice, the criticism from Trump, besides Rand Paul, really came from the moderators. A lot of the guys were trying to mimic Trump. They were trying to mimic him I mean, even Rubio decided to build a fence. I wanted to tell him, look, Rubio, we need a wall, not a fence. But we'll give him some chops and at least admitting that there needs to be some type of structure. But I mean, what I saw Donald Trump, I saw 8 Trump wannabes, and I saw an angry Rand Paul. That's what was on the stage. And that's why what you said at the first segment rings true. It was the moderators that did the dirty work against Trump. The folks on the stage were actually pretty good. I thought one of the better parts of the evening, and that's why I think that you're seeing something with Huckabee, Cruz, and Trump. When Huckabee gave that closing comment, and he was talking about the person leading in the polls, the blowhard, yada, and everybody thought it was Trump, and he said Hillary, I thought it was masterful. He had a good moment there. And that's what these guys have to do at this juncture. They're going to be remembered for basically a soundbite. They're not going to be able to get much out in terms of policy because, like you said, Donald Trump won the night with 10 minutes, and I think Rand Paul lost the night with 5. And I want to tell you something, Craig. The Fox moderators, they got 31 minutes. So that tells you when the moderators have 3 times the amount of speaking time than the candidate with the most speaking time, that should tell you something right there. But if I'm on these campaigns and I'm looking, I'm like, okay, at this juncture, I have to get some good sound bites that will get me good press and will open up the door for my candidate to then deliver the policy aspect in a more basically one-on-one format in these interviews. You're not going to get it in the debate when you have 10 people on the stage all clamoring to be the alternative to Donald Trump.
And when you got a guy like Donald Trump who has learned how to speak the truth in a very direct, masterful fashion. I mean, for example, they tease him about a wall. How are you going to build a wall along the southern border? And his rejoinder is, well, gee, 700 years ago, during the Ming Dynasty, they built one 5,500 miles long along the Chinese border. So tell me, what did they know that we don't know about building walls?
It's a true point, and that is why Trump is speaking in a manner that is understandable to all Americans. And that's where I think Rand Paul loses it because he tries to become the academic, and I think everybody just tunes him out. But Donald Trump is talking in that manner, and he's talking about issues, Craig, that the establishment of both parties thought were dead. I mean, when was the last time we really had a candidate that came up to talk about free trade and what it has done to harm the country? We haven't. The last time in my recollection was Pat Buchanan in 2000, but ever since then, it was just assumed that if you were a free trader, you were a protectionist, and therefore you were going to be exiled. Donald Trump is bringing back issues that many thought were dead, and it's remarkable to watch. And that's why I said you're going to have to, if I'm on Donald Trump's team, you got to figure out a way to get more policy in there. And I would be so brazen to say if they ask him a personal question, I think he did the bankruptcy thing very well. So if he's asked that again, what I would say, look, go look at the Fox News debate. I answered that. Now I'm going to talk about what I want to talk about and just hit it. That's what he needs to do right now. He needs to be a little bit more forceful, and I think he's going to get it. And the other candidates, they're going to have to start attacking him. Rand Paul did it because I think Rand Paul understood that the only way he was going to get pressed is if he got into a fight with Donald Trump. The only problem is that he lost that fight, and then he lost the fight with Chris Christie. So these other candidates need to go home, just like they do on NFL. They got to study these tapes and say, where do I see Trump as being vulnerable, and where can I get him? I just thought the best part of the night, too, was when he said that when he gave Hillary Clinton money, what did he get from it? And it was, I got her to come to my wedding. I want Hillary to respond to that.
Yeah, absolutely. I danced at your wedding. Wasn't there a Teresa Brewer song? Well, at any rate, we're going to take a time out, come back to more of the conversation.